Romania.
Romania?
Yeah. I wonder if Dracula's watching.
That's Transylvania.
That's right.
I think it's time for a geography lesson, don't you, boys and girls? I think so. Because I just can't let that blatant misinformation on Jerry Lawler's part go unnoticed. And if everybody's going to be making a big deal about the mistakes that Lillian Garcia made as ring announcer throughout the Over the Limit pay-per-view, I can't let this major one on Jerry Lawler's part go unnoticed and uncorrected. I must provide the correct information regarding a certain region of the European continent. And I want to make sure that, all the facts are straight and everything, and, potential audience members that saw and heard the comment don't walk away thinking that Jerry Lawler was completely correct in his statement. So here goes. I pulled this information off of a Transylvanian tourism website, which sounds really weird, but get the images that you see in the old, Universal horror films. Try and get that image out of your mind, because Transylvania is almost nothing like that. Yeah, I pulled this off of a tourism website. This wasn't off of a Wikipedia page that, information that could be tampered with. This is straight up legit, the facts regarding Transylvania. All right. The name of Transylvania comes from the Latin expression Transilva, which means the land beyond the forests due to the forests which covered the mountains in the area. Transylvania is one of the most important regions of Romania and of Europe as well. It is one of the provinces of medieval Romania, which experienced difficult moments along the centuries. Transylvania is the place where the Romanian nation was born and an important economic and cultural center of the country. And last but not least, it is a region rich in natural and historical tourist attractions, being situated inside the Arc of the Carpathians. Wow, so that's where Vigo's from. Interesting. See, you learn something new every day. So reading, very important. Geography, very important. It's very important that you get that information right, because, kids are very impressionable, and if you give them the wrong information, they're going to assume it's true. So yes, Transylvania is part of Romania. That's still true to this day. And just to prove that I'm right, here's a map. And you will find Transylvania somewhere around here. Learning! It's fun!
Captain Planet, he's our hero. Gonna take pollution down to zero. He's our powers magnified, and he's fighting on the planet side.
Well, now that we got the boring educational stuff out of the way, let's talk about mainly Over the Limit, because that's was kind of the main motivation for me doing this video. I'm sure you're wondering what I thought of the pay-per-view and what I thought of the fallout, which occurred on Monday Night Raw. First of all, what I'll say is I had two choices for Sunday night. I could have either gone with friends to go see Battleship, or I could have watched Over the Limit. I decided on Over the Limit, and no matter what I'm about to say about Over the Limit, I made my choice. I stand by it. I feel like I made the right choice, because I can't imagine Battleship being any good. Now, if anybody saw both, could you tell me if I made the right choice for which one was better? Because Battleship looked just beyond terrible. Or I should call it Transformers 4. But I was like, yeah, no. Now if my friends wanted to go see The Avengers again, I mean, fuck, I'll go see that again. That was fucking amazing. But, yeah, Over the Limit, there were two major problems with this pay-per-view that really were kind of disturbing. And hopefully those trends don't grow from following the show. Hopefully these kind of like fade away and don't become too regular, although one of them is an advancement, but I'll get into that in a second. Talking about the positives, there wasn't a whole lot that was like truly offensive except for one major part, and I'll get into that later. Punk and Bryan was very good. We all expected it to be. It was one of those situations where they didn't have a build-up, they didn't have a storyline. And tonight on Raw, or last night on Raw, Daniel Bryan got completely bitched out, so they kind of have to build him up all over again. if they want to do a rematch. So it's kind of like, all right. I mean, because what's Punk fighting for now? Is he already won the first match? He's already the champion, and Bryan got completely humiliated. So what is there to, what's left for Punk to do? And they kind of did the same thing with Jericho leading into Extreme Rules, where they had done a really good job of keeping Punk from getting the best of Jericho up until that last Go Home Raw, where they did that stupid sobriety test segment where he completely embarrassed Jericho, and it's like, well, you kind of took some of Jericho's heat there, but and that's speaking solely for the promotion of a match. It's really nothing to do with how the match actually plays out. And in this case right here, Punk and Bryan had nothing to go on aside from the fact that they're both very talented. And they just went out there and had a great match, and it was a very good match. I really enjoyed it. It was the best part of this show by far. And if they have future rematches, which it seems like they will, it'll be really good. I mean, what else is there to say? I guess Bryan's going to have to win the title at some point just to kind of shake things up a bit and give him some kind of motivation, although they have to build him up to that rather than just keep knocking him down. But the match was very good and by far the best part of the show. And there are a couple other things. The Divas match was actually surprisingly okay. The tag match was pretty much in line with every other tag match you've seen in the last 5 years, but it wasn't bad. There was that, and there were the 4-way was action packed again. I don't give a shit about the world title, who holds it, who's fighting for it. I think the thing should be abolished. Should be unified with the WWE title and just done away with entirely. But the match itself was action-packed, so I can't begrudge it. So it was like, Again, it's like, okay, not a desirable situation, but the wrestlers did what they could to make it work. And we all knew Jericho was going to eat the pin, but because apparently he's not going to stay too much longer. So, but other than that, though, getting into the major flaws that this pay-per-view had. The first one, and it was just astounding to me, and it really reminded me of 1999 WCW, and I mean that in the worst possible way. How much of this card was last second thrown on unadvertised filler? You started off with a battle royal that was going to determine a title match that was going to happen later in the show. So that's 2 matches right there. Miz got thrown up against the Funkasaurus. Again, they had the same bad match that they had on Raw the week before. And they threw out fucking Ryberg out there, which, by the way, it is so obvious that they're trying to mimic Goldberg with him. And it's like, they're not even trying to hide that that's what they're doing. I think they're just banking on, or they're hoping that their young audience doesn't remember Goldberg. So they're just completely redoing Goldberg, hoping that nobody remembers it, when apparently everybody remembers it. Which, by the way, all these Attitude Era people that keep chanting, like Sexual Chocolate at Mark Henry and Albert at Lord Tensai and Goldberg at Ryback, and there's one other one, whatever. People who keep chanting those things at those wrestlers and everything, I would love it if you chanted Tiger Ali Singh at Jinder Mahal. I'm just throwing that out there. If you want to make me happy, just start chanting Tiger Ali Singh at Jinder Mahal, and that'll actually make his matches worth watching as well. But yeah, and there was, that's 4 matches out of 9 that were unadvertised and thrown on at the last second. And the problem with doing that is that when you do that, you're pretty much telling me that this stuff doesn't matter. It's just here to be filler. This isn't worth pay-per-view promotion. We just have to kill the time. So you're telling me that the Funkasaurus isn't a worthy pay-per-view attraction. This is what they're telling me by doing things like this. I mean, I don't see much of a high in Ryback or the Funkasaurus anyway, but this is what they're projecting to me when they do things like this. The Miz isn't worth pay-per-view promotion. Ryback isn't worth pay-per-view promotion. An IC title match, a Battle Royal setting up the IC title match is not worth pay-per-view promotion. And the Battle Royal was actually, not a fantastic idea, but it was a good solid one. It's like, oh, hey, tune into this Battle Royal and you see the new top contender for one of the 2 championships. They couldn't announce that the week beforehand. And I found it hilarious that they had Santino and Cody Rhodes fighting over who the superior mid-card champion was. They did the match on SmackDown, and they didn't save it for the pay-per-view. I'm like, look, don't you want to like at least try to make a champion versus champion match sound interesting and build it up to a pay-per-view? No, it's just going to get thrown away on SmackDown where almost nobody's watching. Which, by the way, I found it really funny. I was stunned on Raw tonight to find out that Kane beat the crap out of Punk. I was like, wow, I didn't know that. Totally didn't know that. I was like, wow, Punk maybe should have sold those injuries but at the pay-per-view. But then again, who watches SmackDown? So, but yeah, it's really a problem, and it's gotten worse and worse over the years. Well, at first it started with just one match, then it, eventually they threw 2 matches out there randomly with no promotion. That now we're up to 4 that they just randomly throw out there, and it really does give off the impression that they don't know what they're doing, and they're just kind of making it up as they go, which is a WCW in its dying days type of trait, and that is not good. That's not something good that you should be projecting to me, that you're just haphazardly putting your shows together. Cody and Christian, I think suffer. First of all, that backstage segment they had to set up the match was really bad. It's typical WWE plot holes where Cody's going to run down Christian verbally, even though there's a camera right in front of him. The fans can see it. The commentators can, they heard it. They can comment on it. And yet he's just banking that Christian's not going to hear him. And of course, Christian was standing right behind him, which I guess is the only way that Christian is going to catch him, because he's never going to see that footage. Because once they film a backstage segment, they act as if it never happened. Or they act as if the characters don't have access to that footage. That's the best way to sum it up. Even though the commentators do and the fans do. Again, makes no sense. I don't understand it. But, so that was terrible. And Christian's a face now. When did that happen? And he even helped the good guys on Raw tonight going against Johnny Ace, even though 8 weeks ago he was working with Johnny Ace. But now that he's a face, he has to be against Johnny. Again, doesn't make any sense. But there you go. So they had a bad match, I thought, because no promotion. Christian's character change was unexplained, rushed, made no sense, and it was over a title that didn't matter. And Christian found himself a new level of mediocrity with the Intercontinental title, which is being hot potatoed all over the place again. So there's that. And, you could have built that up to make it something worthwhile, and they just kind of threw it out there. If you do want to build up guys like Brodus Clay, like Ryback, like Cody Rhodes, like anybody else that you want to build up, if you want to build them up to the main event, which I don't know what their ultimate goal is with Brodus or Ryback or Cody, but if they want to build them up to make future stars, making their undercard stuff actually mean something is a good way to start doing that. And by having so much of the undercard just completely unadvertised and just thrown out there as random filler is really going to undercut that and really kind of ruin that, I think. But there you go. I think the Funkasaurus is already worn out. I think people are already getting sick of the entrance. The thing about him is that his matches don't matter. It's all about the entrance, and once the entrance goes stale, the whole thing just kind of falls apart. So, yeah, and you can already tell the fans are already uninterested because it's just the same thing every week. But, yeah, that's that. Cut out the filler and actually map out a card, a full card. It's not that hard. You know how I know it's not that hard? Because you used to do it all the time. For better or worse, you could always count on them having at least 7 or 8 matches lined up for each pay-per-view by the week of the show that they could fully promote. It's really not that hard. I would like it if they tried to do something where they announced the full card, like the night after the pay-per-view, and just announce the full card and build it up from there. But they'd have to do a lot of different things to make that work, not doing title matches all the time, and they'd have to do all kinds of format changes to be able to pull that off. But just have a full pay-per-view card lined up. It's really not that hard. TNA's even started doing it. The last 2 pay-per-views have had quote-unquote bonus matches thrown out there. And the word bonus match, bonus implies that it's actually, good. But most of the time it's not. And the fans know it's not. It's just thrown out there filler that doesn't mean anything. And by the way, I thought it was really strange how they did the Battle Royal, and I was honest to God confused by this, because I thought my clock was off or something. I thought everything from my phone to my clock to my watch, everything else was just completely thrown off time, because they did the Battle Royal, and then they did the opening pay-per-view video and the opening pyros, which made me go, wait a minute, I thought the show already started. And I'm looking at my watch, and I'm like, it's 8:15. Wait, what? Was that the pre-show, or was that actually part of the pay-per-view? Is my watch right, or I don't know. It was just really confusing. So I thought that was kind of weird too. But yeah, cut out with the filler. Please stop that. And the other major problem with this pay-per-view, which I have to applaud Vince McMahon for one of the greatest troll jobs in the history of wrestling. I mean, that main event was special. John Cena versus Johnny Ace. I'll go as far to say that it's probably one of the worst pay-per-view main events in WWE history, ranking up there with the Concrete Crypt from Great American Bash '04, which does not get the credit it deserves for being one of the worst matches ever. But go back and watch it. It is an absolute disaster of a match, and they actually closed with it. I mean, everything about that match is just awful. I think it's one of Taker's absolute worst. And I remember watching a shoot interview with the Dudley Boys. It was the Dudleys versus the Undertaker, that match, in case you don't know, or you didn't see it or don't remember. And apparently in the shoot interview, they said something to the effect of, they went backstage after the show, and they walked through the curtain with Undertaker, and Taker turned to them and said, you know, boys, I think we were ribbed. And that's how bad that match was, so that it just felt like a gigantic joke. I mean, that match is real, and that, you know, I'm saying that Ace and Cena is on par with the Concrete Crypt, and the Concrete Crypt to me was on par with some of WCW's worst, like the Chamber of Horrors, and the fucking, I don't even remember what it was called, that fucking Doomsday Cage or whatever it was, where it was Hogan and Savage versus 20 people, and they still won. Yeah, that fucking match. I mean, it was pretty bad. And this match, what ruined this match from the very beginning is the fact, and I talked about it a million times, I do not care about the Evil Boss story anymore. I don't care. You know, oh, is Johnny Ace going to stay in power? Why is this still a thing? Why is this angle still being rehashed? It's the same thing as the NWO. And after watching Raw tonight, I have this fear that Johnny Ace is going to get himself a stable now. And I'm like, oh, dear God, it's going to turn into a stable war, too. It's like, no more stable wars, no more evil bosses. We're past the Monday Night War period. It was great back then. It was great in 96, 97, 98. It's done now. Austin McMahon, Evil Boss. It was awesome. It was cutting edge. It was original. Had strong characters. It's over now. It's been pounded to death. I don't care anymore. And I don't care if Johnny Ace gets beat up. I don't care when or if he'll lose his power. I'm sick and tired of centering the entire show around the wants and desires of the authority figure. And it's even the same way when they have an authority figure that clearly favors the baby faces. Because it's kind of like, I feel like the authority figure should have no personal attachment to anybody. He should just be worried about putting on the best show possible and making the most fair decisions possible. And that should be his role. And the rest of the show should be centered around building up fights that between the actual wrestlers that actually, you know, matter. But when you build everything around the Evil Boss and the Evil Boss becomes the sole focus of the show, it just kind of, you know, it creates so many problems where the wrestlers just don't matter because they don't matter unless they're interacting in some way with that authority figure, and it shouldn't be that way. It's just, I don't know. So going into the match, I didn't give a shit, and then watching them do this horrible comedy shtick for what felt like an eternity was really, really bad. It was like a shitty Benny Hill version of the Taker McMahon Buried Alive match, which I wasn't too high on that match either because I had gotten sick of McMahon by 03, so that tells you how overexposed I feel the Evil Boss thing is. I mean, again, McMahon Austin in the cage, that was fantastic because it had never been done before, and Vince was finally getting his comeuppance, and it It was great, but here, I mean, this just feels like a bad rehash and a very unfunny one too. So that happened, and then who didn't see that ending coming a mile away? I called it in my preview video. Did I not? Go back and watch my last video. I'm pretty sure I called it. That Big Show was going to interfere, and you know, what did that accomplish? What did this match accomplish? What did that ending accomplish for the future of WWE storylines? Johnny Ace is still in charge. Yippee. I still don't care. And we're going to get Cena versus Big Show for the 85th time because, you know, the first 84 times were so great, we have to get it again. And that's what we're stuck with. And, you know, Cena is really at that same point that Hogan was at in the early 90s when he had pretty much beaten everybody and they were just struggling to find opponents for him. In Hogan's case, they found, like, cartoony type characters for him to work with, like Earthquake. And I liked Earthquake, but, you know, it was like, oh, well, we don't have Bundy anymore. He's already beat him, so let's just feed Earthquake to him. And things like that. You know, he never actually worked with Papa Shango, but Papa Shango did interfere in his match at WrestleMania 8. There was Sid Justice at the time. Yeah, that was a feud. And that one was a rehash of the, oh, my partner turned on me feud, which they already did with Hogan like 10 times by that point. So he's really at that same point where it's like, oh, God, he's beating everybody. He's like, who does he work with? Even tonight on Raw, it's like, oh, I keep saying tonight. It was last night. He worked with Otunga. He's beaten Otunga like 100 times. He's worked with Big Show like 100 times. And now he's definitely going to have a program with Lord Tensai. And it's kind of like Lord Tensai is seen as Earthquake, where it's like, oh, he's beating every other big guy. We don't have everybody else, so let's throw this cartoony-looking Japanese guy at him. Or, I'm sorry, white guy in Japanese culture at him. So yeah, I mean, you know, the reason The Rock and the Brock Lesnar feuds were so good for Cena because it actually gave him like a really legitimate, fresh opponent that was like big A-level type of deal, and not just a rehash of something they'd already done before. So yeah, I was like, am I excited for Cena and Big Show part 457? No, I was like, what? Is he gonna F you, or I'm sorry, attitude adjust him? He's done it like 17 times. I mean, okay, Big Show once threw Cena through a spotlight. And, you know, that's about as high as that feud's ever going to go, okay? I mean, once you've done that, I mean, that's pretty much as high as your feud can go. So it's not going to, like, it's going to suck. I mean, I don't know what to tell you. It's going to suck. And there's so many plot holes in this, too, that they tried to address on Raw, which I felt like was... They must have been reading, like, Twitter feeds or something and just seeing, like, people just point out all the plot holes in this. Like, okay, so the board of directors says that if Ace loses this match, he gets fired. Why don't they just fire him anyway? They obviously want to fire him. They almost had Triple H fire him a couple months ago. And why don't they just fire him? Regardless of whether or not he wins. Does him winning the match somehow make him qualified to be a WWE executive? The flip side of that, does him losing that match somehow make him unqualified even though wrestling's not part of his job description? No. And okay, he had Big Show help him win even though Big Show was not under contract, which was their little loophole for doing that. But so the board of directors says they're going to fire anybody that interferes in that match, but they're going to let Johnny Ace hire the guy that did the thing that they were going to fire people over. Make sense? No. See, none of this. There's so many just lapses in logic for this whole thing. And, you know, I'm not going to sit here and say Over the Limit was like one of the worst shows ever. I'm not. It wasn't like... It was blasé at best with one great match. But... that main event was so bad, especially after the Lesnar-Cena match from Extreme Rules was such a well put together, well structured, and very exciting main event. To go to this crap, just wow, just really, just wow, what a horrible follow up to that. And again, I love that Cena's like, oh, I'm gonna go away for a while, guys, and he's still there every week, and he's got to work with Big Show now, so yay. Yeah, it's Over the Limit. I wasn't very impressed. It was definitely a huge step below Extreme Rules, which I thought was very good. And even comparing it to Sacrifice from last week, I mean, Sacrifice was kind of the same thing in that both shows were thrown together B pay-per-views that didn't have very great build-ups. But Sacrifice was at least a more coherently put together pay-per-view and was more solidly entertaining throughout. This was just kind of a mess that it looked like they were just kind of making up on the fly for a lot of it, with the wrestlers having to make the best of a bad situation, which paid off with Punk and Bryan, but not much else. So, yeah, Over the Limit. Wasn't overly impressed with that. I do have a couple plans for more positive videos in the future. Number one was Slammiversary coming up, the 10th anniversary of TNA. I do want to do something for that, like kind of a positive look back at TNA. I think about doing like a top 10 best matches in TNA history or something like that. And as we approach the 1000th episode of Raw, where they go 3 hours permanently, which, again, I'm not a fan of that, but, as we get closer to that, I'm thinking about doing a tribute video to my all-time favorite episode of Monday Night Raw. And yes, I know exactly which episode I would talk about, but we'll get there when we get there. So there's going to be a little bit more positivity coming along in the next couple of weeks. So be on the lookout for that. And that's all I have for now. I'm probably going to do another video this week, and I just had to get this out there because I wanted to get the geography lesson in there because I don't know, it just really bugged me that he got that wrong. And I did want to talk about the developments coming out of Over the Limit because it really left me feeling kind of sour. So, all right, that's all I've got for now. I'll see you later this week, and toodaloo, everybody.